Namaskar, Ashok Vyas, and today's show is very special because we are talking about Ma. Mother is the first teacher of a child, and mother remains a constant companion in our psychological space. If you are hurt somewhere, Are Ma is the first sound that comes. And today I have very special mother and daughter who will be sharing uh, the precious aspect of this relationship. And I take this opportunity of welcoming Dr. Nalini Juthani ji and Dr. Manisha Juthani both together. And I'll give a very important responsibility first to Manisha ji to introduce her mother. If you were to say something about her, and of course, I am also aware that she is number one or pioneer in several fields. So, uh, take it away, Manisha. How would you introduce your mother?
Well, it's my honor to introduce all of you to Dr. Nalini Juthani, who was born in 1946, educated as a physician in India, and came to the United States in 1970 after being a newlywed. And as a new immigrant in this country, learned all the know-how about how to get around the United States and how to succeed as an immigrant, as my dad, who was working very long hours at the time, and she had to know everything there was to know about the United States. And after taking that period of time, went on to do a residency in psychiatry and is a world-renowned expert in psychiatry and particularly in the area of spirituality and medicine and spirituality and psychiatry. And these accolades were seen throughout the country in her roles as a leading Indian American psychiatrist in her professional career and as a role model for many Indian American physicians and psychiatrists who were training. And after she was a residency program director for 25 years, she went on to be a site visitor for the ACGME, the accrediting body of educational institutions for residencies and fellowships, and was a pioneer there as well as somebody who was a former program director and I believe the first Indian who was to do such a role. But all of these accolades that she had professionally are secondary to the role she had as a mother, as a daughter, and for me, she's my hero.
Such a wonderful introduction, Manisha. You get extra chocolates from your mom for, for this nice way of presenting her. But now it is her turn, and what our viewers are also aware now that you are Department of Public Health Commissioner, Connecticut, and there are many, many more honors and awards that you are also recipient of, and we'll talk about some of them. But let me request Nalini ji to now introduce her daughter.
This is a real pleasure and the easiest task that I ever had because, in my role as a physician psychiatrist, I have introduced many, many people, and I would write down and take notes, and I would not do as good a job as Manisha did because that would be very difficult. Considering my age, I remember less than her. But let me start by saying that Manisha was born in 1973. She is our first child, first daughter, and the time when she was born, we were not equipped with a lot of things at that time because we were in the country for only 3 years. However, as she grew up, she taught me how to be an American, meaning what are the kind of clothes I should have in my closet, And many times we went shopping together. She used to say she had no clothes, so that we should both go together and buy stuff. And to an extent that when I went to my hospital uh, kind of settings, people said, "Your wardrobe has changed." Could not
So,
tell that
Nalini,
this.
I interrupt you for a quick second just to kind of relate to our viewers what Representative Jonathan Steinberg said about her while the process of her confirmation as commissioner was taking place. And he said, we are extremely lucky to have somebody with those kind of qualifications and that kind of character willing to serve in a very difficult, challenging job of commissioner of the Department of Public Health in these challenging times. And indeed, we'll talk a little bit about what she's doing. And with your permission, I'll actually read out. Uh, there is so much to Dr. Manisha, and what I felt worth mentioning is with Yale School of Medicine, Associate Professor of Medicine, Infectious Disease and Epidemiology, Microbial Disease, Masters in Health Science Director in Infectious Disease, Internal Medicine, Fund to Retain Clinical Scientist, Co-Director Internal Medicine. So there is quite a bit related to her, call it, portfolio, which also includes being director of internal medicine fellowship program, internal medicine. So there is a complete, I would, if I use in a slightly less serious manner, there is a complete package of personality, personality with Manisha, and I guess what she saw as she was growing up. In you in terms of some of your personality traits also trickle down consciously or unconsciously. And please continue, I interrupted you, but then we'll move towards this side of learning from each other.
Well, first of all, everything that I say, I want you and your audience to know how proud of her I am and my husband is. She has fulfilled all our dreams. Right from the beginning, when she was very little, people used to look at her in schools or even in the playground, and they would tell us, she is going to be a leader. You know that, right? And we knew it. She was all throughout a leader for her two siblings. Whenever we went out and I look at the pictures now, she was the one holding their hands. So, this is the level of responsibility she took. We may have given her, but she took. And as she grew up, she was a superstar everywhere, to an extent that she was very compassionate. Her classmate, who was deaf and could not understand what the teacher said, somehow she took the role of helping her understand what the teacher was saying. And we knew that these are the characteristics that are going to stick with her as she will grow older. Uh, she was the first at Cornell when she graduated from medical school. There was no female. Manisha, you say it right. You say it. I'm choking. I can't say it.
Yeah, we're kind of feeling Nalini is becoming very emotional, and
Yes.
maybe there is something else also. But so, Manisha, ambitious or the kind of goal that we set for ourselves comes from within as well as from what impressions we gather from our parents. In your case, how would you say how you chose to follow the path that you have taken?
Many people ask me if I knew that I was going to be a doctor. And from a young age, I say sometimes my parents always put in my head that I was smart enough to be a doctor and that it was a good profession. And, maybe there was a little bit brainwashing, but it was something that I believed. And it was something that I went to college with a very laser focus on what I was going to do. And medical training and pre-medical training is very challenging. You need to be very focused and you need to be very committed to the field. I often tell young people now that if you don't really know if you want to do it, then it's not worth it. It's too hard of a road to really go down. But I stuck with that. And it's not to say that there weren't times that I was struggling and had doubts because of the difficult road. But I did have two role models who showed me a path of what this profession and life could take you on. And as I described, my mom was an educator as a residency program director, and that always seemed interesting to me. When I finished my fellowship training in infectious diseases, I chose a different path initially, focusing more on research, which was very helpful to me because I also saw patients, but it allowed me a lot of flexibility in a difficult field of infectious diseases to be able to raise a family and have more of a balanced life versus a purely clinical job, which was very challenging. But when I did become infectious disease fellowship program director at Yale, that was very much falling in my mom's footsteps of being an educator and running a program. And what I saw in my mother was somebody who was able to balance motherhood and parenthood and a professional life. And I saw somebody who really found a way to do it all, but in a balanced way. Sometimes having to prioritize work, sometimes having to prioritize family. Usually you never have it completely 100% right at any given moment, but you have to make choices. And I saw somebody who was able to do that in a way that I never felt she wasn't there for me. And I always felt that she was there. And that's what I wanted to be able to do for my children as well.
So now let's move towards the other side where we don't look at both of you as professionals, but rather in a way which any household viewer who experiences some difference of opinion and sometimes disagreements, which may sometimes be frustrating, etc. Knowing Nalini ji, that chances must have been less. Yet, Nalini ji, was there any time when you really felt angry with Manisha while she was a child? Maybe she did something that you didn't approve of or something?
Of course, there is no way that a child can grow up without giving them feedback.
Hard time.
What is right, what is wrong? Yes, absolutely. I had followed my mother's footsteps, although I would say that times were different. But to tell the child what is right, what is wrong, was absolutely a must. I was the disciplinarian in our family. My husband was a little bit of a softie, but we had a great um, togetherness to work with the children. And that was, we disagreed behind the closed doors, but in front of the children we always agreed, and we gave them the message that children tend to get away from one and go to the other and take sides and stuff like that, which never happened. But since Manisha was our oldest, she made our life so much easier because because she got the hard part of discipline, and the other two figured out that if she is not allowed to do that, that means we better not try.
So let me now request Manisha to be to allow herself to go to those memories where you really felt angry with your mother and you didn't have a chance to tell her tell her. Maybe there was some disagreement, something that you wanted to do, but being the kind of disciplinarian that she was, anything of that sort, please.
I think one of the good things that we had was we had an open relationship and we actually talked quite a lot. So she knows all the things that I didn't like and that I did. We talked about it in real time as they happened. So there's actually no real secrets there. But what I would say is that teenage is a time of rebellion. It's a time of exploration. It's a time of identifying who you are and growing. And as she clearly outlined, being the oldest and being immigrants, they learned by me growing and becoming an adult. And there were lots of conversations we had in my ending years of high school. But by the time I graduated and went off to college, we had worked through a lot of that. And I think when she says that things became easier for my siblings is because they went through those growing pains with me. So that, and there weren't anything that bad, but simple things about going out with friends or things like that that were new territory for immigrant parents. And I think having done that with me, I would say, were much more lax with my siblings and much more easy and forgiving.
So, Nalini, now not just for Manisha, but in general, as she mentioned about immigrant parents, and even if you are not immigrant, teenage and a new sense of identity and a new idea about who I am, whether boy or girl, and additional a layer of ego. So you want to hold on to it. Earlier, you would say, "Okay, mom is saying, dad is saying," but I said, "This is me. I want it." So how those kind of interactions, if there were any, between you and Manisha, or maybe if she wanted to have a night out with friends or something of that sort, generally was anything that stayed with you?
Yeah, the thing that comes to my mind right now is as a teenager when she started to drive the car. Our goal was to have a, uh big car so that when all five of us were going out, we could use that and she can use it otherwise as well. That's the time when she began to want to go to the parties and some of them in Long Island and stuff like that. An immigrant parent is overprotective, no matter where they come from. And I was very scared that if I cannot drive at night, how will she do it? But the good part that occurred and less traumatic for me was when I discussed anything, and Manisha and I talked mostly everything that was having any conflicting relationship. So I would say, no, I don't think this is a good idea. But if I finally fell and could not convince her, then I said, go ask daddy. And daddy would say, what did mommy say? Mommy says, no, that's it. And don't come back.
Boss is
So
always right.
so that was very helpful, but most of the work was already done with mommy. And I must say that I learned a lot as an immigrant from my first child, that's Manisha, regarding education. I went to the school as a parent and I would say I feel I'm in whatever grade she was in, whether she was in fourth grade or fifth grade, whatever, because I put myself as a child in that grade in America, not in India. And so there was plenty for me to learn. And I have given many talks like this in settings where her age people had invited me to come and educate other parents as to how to do it as an immigrant. And I always said that my learning began with my oldest child, Manisha. And she would say things that made me think a lot.
Like
For
what, Manisha?
example,
Like what? Let me bring let me bring Manisha. What were the kind of things that you said which you feel made her think? And let me also think with both of you together, uh, whether you have wonderful relationship with your parents or it's not that good, but world is a big place, and you gradually have your own circle of friends in school, or if you start working, and then also there is another sort of layer or orbit of people who matter to you. So how was it, Manisha, to find a balance between uh, family relations and other relations? Because gradually, after teenage, we hear that kids, no, I've also seen it. No, kids start, kids start finding their friends more important than family members, and then they kind of eventually discover dynamics which is a sort of a harmonious equilibrium. And in your case, share some insight on that.
So I think you asked what is one of the things that maybe I remember, or that we, in terms of the challenges we may have had. And I remember something that my mom always remembers I said, which is that there would be times she would tell me what to do or what not to do. And apparently I said something to the effect that sometimes you have to make your own mistakes to then learn from them and be able to implement them in your own life. And I think this is true in life. We all know this to some degree. People, our elders often will tell us a million things. And even if we listen to a lot of it, until you actually, burn your hand yourself, do you maybe sometimes realize that you shouldn't put your hand on something hot. So I think that that is something that we often talk about, that I must have said, and that she often remembers. And I think that, one of the things I found good was going to college. It wasn't that far, a few hours away, but it was away. And I didn't see my parents every day. You make your friends, you make your networks, you do learn to become more independent. But as you do that, and as you then proceed on in life, you learn to develop who you can trust, who are your true friends. But then you also remember who your rocks are and who your solid foundation is. And this is where then you know what family really means, and the values we were raised with in terms of what a family really means, and who are what my mom would call fly-by-night friends versus true friends, or people that become extended family. And life teaches you that, and you learn a little bit and maybe get burnt a little bit along the way in terms of who you can trust, who you can't trust. But I do think at the end of the day, we were raised with that foundation and the value of what family means. And so I think that has kept all of us very tightly bound together as family members.
That is beautiful and very nice. But I go towards that side which is less nice, and where I found there is a scope to request both of you. And she says that she convinced you that about someone making his or her own mistakes and learn from them. So, any one mistake of her that you remember, Nalini ji, which she made, and you felt, oh, she should have asked me before taking this decision or before doing this. No?
I not that I don't remember, but I would say that when I had, there was hardly anything I did not know. She had her first boyfriend. I knew everything about him. She, before she got married to her current husband, Raj, we knew quite a few things that this is going to happen. Uh,
So,
so, my
yeah.
memory, Manisha, if you remember, you tell, but I don't.
Yeah, Manisha, I repeat this question. Any mistake that you made which you felt your mom or dad would have liked that you asked them before doing that? Um,
I don't think there's anything very big mistake that I can say that way, but there are things like my mom said that and when she says current husband, there's really only one husband, okay? But
I know that. that is,
she
yeah,
said
Manisha,
current
yeah,
husband.
that's an
that was,
immigrant. That's
yeah.
an
So,
immigrant.
Manisha, that was her mistake. That was her mistake. I was also thinking.
Only
Okay,
one
so
husband.
I'm glad you clarified. Okay, otherwise it would have been
But
a problem.
having
Yeah.
said having said that, have there been relationships either with friends or with boyfriends where maybe they would have advised something different, or I made some, but these were small things,
Okay, so
small
we
things in my
move.
life.
Yeah.
I would say
Okay.
there was nothing like really big. I mean, I would say small things where I would say, oh yeah, they warned me about that or whatever. But my one and only current husband, I started dating when I was 19 years old. So for it's been 30 years since our first date. And so, he has been in my life for a long time. So it's things that happened before the age of 19.
Okay, so Manisha, tell me when you felt like telling your mom about your boyfriend, what was the apprehension that you had? Were you confident that she'll understand, or you had some kind of hesitation that she may not respond positively?
So this was in the high school times, and I would say that again, like I said, being the oldest, it was a new territory for me with my parents. But I think overall, I had friends who I knew who were doing quite a lot of lying and sort of things behind the parents' back. And look, I'm not going to say every single thing I went back home and told my parents, but there was nothing that was beyond a scope. That's just normal human behavior. You don't tell every single thing. But on the other hand, they knew where I was going. They knew who I was with. And I think I kind of felt like I'm going to college in a year, and there are going to be things that happen in college. There's going to be even more experiences. So I think having those conversations, I think my mom and I understood that this is a good conversation to have now before
Absolutely.
going off to college.
So somehow we are almost near last 3 minutes. So I'll request Nalini ji to remember what did you have retained from the impressions of your mother and how you remember her today.
My mother was a widow when she was 24. And in spite of all that, she taught me and my sister a lot of things that you hardly hear from your mother in India. And I'm going to tell you one thing which I have passed on to everybody. When having dinner together, three of us, one time she said, "You all talk about you will have boyfriends and this and that and love, love. But let me tell you something. It is perfectly all right to fall in love with a boyfriend, to have a boyfriend. But remember one thing, sex is a good thing." And my sister and I were like, "Can we disappear somewhere?" And she said, "But remember one thing, there is a right time, a right place, and a right person for everything, including sex." And I think this was the wisest advice any mother could have ever given to their child, especially in India when we did not
So,
talk about it.
Nalini, so 1 minute for Manisha now. In addition to what we heard, anything that you have picked up from Nalini ji, and what would you like to tell her on Mother's Day?
Well, first of all, I would just say that I'm so proud of her, and I am so blessed to be 49 years old, have her in my life as a guiding force for all these years. Happy Mother's Day, and I love you a lot. And I think what I would say that I remember is that I always observed the loving relationship she had with her mother, guiding force and open-minded thinking and strong personality, but loving personality. And it's something that I've tried to embody in myself as well.
Wonderful. So much to learn from both of you. And Manisha, as we mentioned earlier, is Public Commissioner of Health with Connecticut. And we'll talk about her leadership skills some other day. But today was very, very interesting and enlightening conversation. I would say candid. And there's nothing to hide, and there has never been. So that's very, very good. And Nalini ji, thank you very much for joining us. And Manisha, thank you for taking time out and celebrating part of your Mother's Day with us, I would say in advance. So, lots of good wishes for both of you. Namaste.
Namaste.
Thanking both of them and thanking all of you for being with us. This is Ashok. Namaste.